Good evening, everyone. I'm RJ Kerr, and this is Let's Write an Adventure. Before we get into our regularly scheduled live stream today, just a quick announcement. If you are a Forever DM or are looking for a fun, inclusive, exciting gaming table to join, or just want to see how I actually run adventures, not just how I write them, you should come join me on startplaying.games/GM/RJ Kerr. I've still got spaces open in a campaign that's starting the first week of September using the early access to the new 2024 Player's Handbook. And we'll be playing Lost Mine of Phandelver, building up to the rest of Phandelver and below, the Shattered Obelisk. So if you're interested in all in that, come join my campaign, see how I run games, and compare that to how I write them, or just come and enjoy yourself. Anyway, enough of that. Let's get into the reason that we're all here, and that's to write an adventure. So, if you are joining us for the very first time, uh, we are working on a adventure where the characters have been hired by a community leader of Sky Song Gulch, a woman that we now know as Nysa Stonehearth, to recover the only known deposit of our MacGuffin, cold iron, a mystical, magical crafting material that has fey qualities to it that was lost in a glacial mine slash fortress that was abandoned because it was ravaged by disease centuries ago. The community, Skysong Gulch, needs it to save themselves from the foretold coming of the Bloodgood Bloodgood Sisters Hag Coven. And the characters will have been led to believe that the village plans to fight these powerful Fae with the cold iron. But when they return, they discover the village actually intends to pay off the hags with the cold iron, thus completing an ancient pact. The party must then decide whether to wash their hands of the incident and walk away, or whether they should try to rouse the community to oppose the hags or try to face them themselves. In either case, we're well, any of those three options or anything else that the characters come up with, we're writing the adventure that follows, or the adventure that leads up to that, I should say. So, without any further ado, let me share my screen here. And last time we were working on building out components of Sky Song Gulch itself. We've done a lot to build out the adventure structure itself here, and frankly, with what we have, it could be very playable. But since we have a cool thing that you rarely get as a DM, and that's infinite time, we're going to do some kind of nitpicky, nuanced stuff and really build this whole place out into the maximum of what it could be. Um, Fully acknowledging that when you're running a real campaign where you have deadlines to get some of this stuff done, and uh, you know, for example, you've run a session this week, you had a session next week, you got to have the things they need to play during that time. You don't want to spend time wasted crafting things that your players are never going to touch on. But since we are under no such constraints here, we are going to touch on everything if we can. So, with that being said, last time we spent some time filling out some of the locations in Skysong Gulch. Um, and really focusing on areas that the players are likely to interact with. Now, we made a list of those just kind of off the cuff, and these are really just kind of our best guess of where the characters could go. They could certainly go just about anywhere else in Skysong Gulch. They could really take a real left turn if we wanted to, but this gives us a good primer. So we've got a tavern and inn, we've got a general store to fill out, a smithy, a stable, a temple, town hall, library, rangers union, and an underworld hangout. And most of these are derived, or I should say, are kind of linked to um, some of the important personalities that the characters may meet depending on how they choose to handle the adventure following their return from the Berg with the cold iron. I almost called it the cold stone iron. That sounds delicious. Cold stone. Anyway, so today we're going to keep building these out, and something I want to focus on today, something that just kind of struck me a little bit before we signed on here as I was kind of perusing our notes and refreshing my memory on what we've done, is um, we've been doing a fair amount of kind of world building in here by layering in some themes from Skysong Gulch and giving it kind of a general atmosphere. We've talked a lot about, buildings and shops cut into stone. We have fossils that appear as parts of the architecture and the decor in various places. But we have the opportunity to do some more world building. And for that, I'm going to focus in on the stables. But before we do that, we should probably finish up Wind Rider Smithy, since that is kind of one third done. So, to refresh our memories on this, the Wind Rider Smithy we decided was a stiflingly hot alcove set into the far end of the third level of Skysong Gulch. Soot stains coat the blackened ceiling despite the chimney that dominated, should say, that dominates, not dominated, dominates the back half of the workspace. The air here is perpetually hazy. Man, I was going fast last time, wasn't I? With a thin smoke that never seems to dissipate. Selena never seems to notice the thick, let's say, the thicken of acrid atmosphere. That should be the thick and acrid atmosphere. Really was flying through this. Good thing is, when you do these things, they're for you. You can make all the typos you want. Nobody's ever going to know. And then Selena Windrider is our smith, and she's a stout-armed, elvish woman with a hammer and tongs tattooed across her chest. She's an artisan at heart, more comfortable around her craft than people. And something that you may have noticed as we've been working through this, I very rarely assign species to my NPCs. I just, most of the time, it really doesn't matter to me. This is the person they are, and their species is just kind of an ancillary detail. And so I frequently won't mention it unless it's important for whatever reason. But every once in a while, I run into an NPC that I'm just, hey, they're an elf, they're an orc, they're a dwarf, they're a gnome. Gnomes come up a lot. But we still need to put in a few more details here. Specifically, we need a cool element, and then we need a little bit about what the smithy offers. So let's say weapons and armor bearing metal. Well, let's not complicate our wording here. We can say metal weapons and armor can be purchased, ordered, and resized here. And I'll make the note metal weapons, but then when I play this kind of thing, I'll draw the line at if the characters want to get a wooden club or a staff, they probably can't get that here. But arrows, bolts, things that have a wooden component, or I should say have a metal component, but may have large wood features, they'll still get purchased here most likely, unless for whatever reason I really just want to shuffle those over to a general store. And to some extent, that might be up to the players. I might just kind of go with, it depends on where they are when they ask about buying arrows or ask about picking up, shields or things like that. If they're at the general store and they want arrows, well, maybe that's the place that sells them. If they're the smithy, well, then they're sold here. There's nothing wrong with having them sold at both, but generally I try to split it up to get the players to do a little more exploration around town, meeting more people, and potentially learning more about the adventure to come. So, metal weapons and armor can be purchased here and ordered and resized. Resizing doesn't come up a lot in D&D, but there is, optional rules for requiring characters to get armor resized after they found it, because it's, things like plate armor are made for an individual. And so, if that's something that you want to build into your game, especially if you're running kind of a very gritty adventure, which I really like to run, I think it adds a level of drama to it. Then that's something to potentially work in here. If you're doing kind of a hand wave kind of deal for some of those details, like I will frequently do in some of my in many of my campaigns, especially when I'm not running something that's great. I'm running something that's higher fantasy. Then yeah, go for it. Nothing wrong with that. So the last thing we need is a unique detail. So we've got a lot of fossils. We've got a lot of mineral elements throughout Sky Song Gulch, and I like that theme. I don't want to lean too heavily into the fossils, though. We don't want there to be a fossil in every single kind of building. I mean, they're probably there. You know, if somebody asks, they're probably details, but we don't want to make that the thing that in every place. So, Wind Rider Smithy. What should it have? Um, oh, well, how about this? How about there is a really nice um, uh, bas relief carving of a soaring Pegasus right into the stone above the forge. Um, as kind of the emblem of the Wind Rider family, but just a really big one that really kind of draws the eye. Yeah, I like that. Okay. We'll say Mastercraft relief carving of a soaring Pegasus. Pegasus. Not spelling that right. Oh, it just wants me to capitalize it. Ridiculous. All right. About to really Pegasus. Covering the stone above the forge. Cool. Great. I might say fills back wall, just to give ourselves a sense of perspective here, kind of drawing the attention. Wonderful. Okay, so that's Wind Rider Smithy. So let's get back into the stables here, because we have a very unique kind of structure here, right? The to refresh everyone's memory, the town is effectively this built into the walls of this split plateau that has been carved in half by through time over time by this winding river, and so we get that kind of that gulch that runs through it, and it's very windy, and and that's where the name comes from, that sky song, right? So it's get the whistling of the wind, which reminds me we probably need like wind chimes and things. That would be another kind of thing for the kind of fit in well with the design of Sky Song Gulch. Maybe that'll feature in the general store. Let me put those. Make a note here. Wind chimes. Don't want to lose that idea. But that means that approaching the town, there would be sort of access from land, sea, well, sea being river, so land, water, and air, right? Because this is a fantasy world. We have things like griffins and pegasi that can soar and can fly, and it would make sense that they could land here. And so we could do a couple things here. Let me back up. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Or I should say, I'm kind of making leaps that connect the dots in my brain on the logic here, but I don't think I've thoroughly explained it. So we have a world building opportunity here where we have an unusual situation that needs a solution, right? It is not unusual for people to travel to this town with beasts of burden on horseback, or riding some other creature. But those creatures can be land creatures, water creatures, air creatures, but also this isn't like a regular old town where you can kind of just trot the horse up into a wooden building that's, on the main road, just like every other building there. There's, everything else we have here is dug into the stone and has multiple levels throughout the throughout the town, right? With certain businesses and certain shops being on specific levels, but the stables are a place where you store your mounts, right? While you're there, they look after your animals while you're staying in town, and that means that they need to have access points from all three areas where mounts might arrive, which uh, adds a lot of kind of life to this. When you are thinking through your places, your towns, your settlements, your cities, what have you, and there's just a common there's something that everyday life in this world would call for that is impeded in some way by the structure of your settlement. That's a great thing because now you've got to come up with an unusual way in which that problem is solved. That the people here go about, handling that situation, and that makes really unique features in settlements and really makes them stand apart. Other than just saying, "Oh, this is built into a plateau." We've got lots of kind of stuff with that here, but this is one in particular that the characters might have to interact with and have to interact with early on, setting the stage. One mistake that a lot of DMs make is they they know they need to paint a word picture. They need to describe the world as it exists in the situation in which the characters find themselves so that the players have touch points. And so they worry that without enough information, the players are going to be lost. They're not going to know what to do or where to go. And that's a legitimate concern, right? That is something that can happen. However, sometimes DMs overcompensate by over explaining. They go on these big monologues of exposition where they describe, you know, every little detail of this world from creation to beginning. They give their players just this wash of primer information, um, with the feeling that now, once they have this information, they'll have what they need to understand this world and really engage with it and make um, legitimate, actually legitimate choices that will affect their campaign. Problem is, humans don't process information until it's important, and they certainly don't process information when it's just kind of dumped on them, right? Because even if your players are really paying attention to your exposition, they're really trying to collect it all, just shoveling all kinds of information onto them that isn't relevant yet is going to mean that very little of it actually sticks. It's just how the human brain works. It remembers things best when it can glom them onto something else, when it can add them to an internal learning structure, right? They're relevant to something else that matters. So, one of the best ways to go about world building is not to open up with a lengthy monologue that kind of, narrates the world as it stands. Instead, it is to give your characters just enough information to understand where they physically are right then and there, and then let world building unfold naturally as they explore, right? Because we could tell them all about the unique challenges of the stable and the fossils that are in all the buildings, that kind of thing, but it's not going to matter to them until they go to one of these places and they interact with that. At that point, it matters. At that point, it will stick. And so that's the place in the story, the place in our adventure where we want to introduce this kind of stuff. So, The stables provide us with a really great opportunity for that by elaborating on how this challenge is faced by the people of Sky Song Gulch, this mundane, everyday sort of thing of just storing people's mounts. Okay, so I don't know what I'm going to call the stables yet. We'll think of that as we go through. Um, but instead, let's describe the place. So I don't like, for whatever reason, I don't like the idea of the stables just being this, underground cavern or what have you, or this cavern set into the uh, into the plateau itself with no sun, and it just has herds of various animals and various pens. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Then that could make a lot of sense, but for whatever reason, I just don't. It doesn't feel true to Sky Song Gulch to me. I feel like there needs to be that maybe this is what the plateau gets used for. The top of the plateau is, pasture lands for livestock and, paddocks for the stables and what have you. And so I imagine that the stables building is one of the only buildings on the top of the plateau. It's perhaps one of the only places not made of stone here. I mean, it might be made of bricks, but I should say not carved into the stone here. Likewise, you could make the decision that they have the stables are segmented, and that there's one on the first level for horses, and one by the river for you know uh, sea elves riding dolphins or what have you, whatever's relevant to this world, right? And then one up on the plateau. But I like the idea of it being one building, and that there are mechanisms for getting uh, the animals from each of the various levels all the way up there, right? Okay, so let's say the stables are a let's see are okay. Let's say the stables stand as the only structure on um, on top of the plateau. Let's see, built of mortared sandstone, let's see here, and timbers. Let's see here. Yeah, built of mortared sandstone and timbers. The stables reside next to a wide paddock, and the adjacent grassy fields of pasture land used by the village's goat herds. And specifically, I imagine goats up on top of the plateau. And we might have people who are the goat herds that are part of kind of the ranchers union, but like the cattle kind of stuff, I imagine outside of the plateau, out in sort of the sweeping plains and valley beyond, right? And it's just how I envision it. There's nothing wrong with this being an enormous plateau that can maintain huge herds of beef, but goats climb rocks really easily. If you've ever watched them, one in the wild or just two running wild, yeah, they're very nimble climbers, and so that just kind of feels natural here. It'd be easy for a goat herd to kind of lead them down narrow steps, into their own sort of barns and what have you, inside the plateau itself. Okay. Let's hear the stables. Accommodate. I can never freaking spell that word, can I? Accommodate. Yeah. ACCOMO. Second M. There we go. The stables accommodate a wide variety of mounts and beasts of burden. Separating incompatible. My goodness, I cannot spell today, can I? Incompatible. Separating incompatible species in separate buildings. So yeah, so the stables could be a series of buildings. They don't have to be just one, right? So yeah, so we have them sort of split out into separate buildings. So, I can imagine this sort of, you got this big, almost cloudless blue sky above, and you've got mounts that can, fly down, maybe wyverns, pegasi, that kind of deal. And that makes it easy for flying creatures to access the stables and be boarded there. But for horses, let's start there. Let's talk traditional beasts of burden. I think they've got to come up through a sort of a spiraling ramp that comes all the way from the base of the plateau and winds its way up through the interior of it all the way to the top, kind of like a parking garage. Okay. Let's see here. Horses and other. Let's make notes for ourselves. Flying mounts can descend directly into one of the corrals set aside for such beasts. Horses and similar terrestrial mounts approach Sky Song Gulch from the lands surrounding and ascend to the stables via a series of spiraling stone tunnels. And that begs the question of aquatic mounts. Now, those don't come up very often in adventures, at least not in most adventures. But they could. We could be building a world where that is a legitimate thing. And you might have an aquatic mount maybe pulling your raft or your keel boat or what have you. That's a world building choice. I think for this, I don't think it adds a lot to the flavor here to create some sort of elaborate, I don't know, bucket system to get aquatic mounts up from the river. So what we might say is that there is in this case we might say there's a separate building, there's an annex down on the docks. We could say an annex next to the docks on the lowest level, serves a few aquatic mounts and beasts of burden that arrive via the river. Okay, so that kind of gives us our cool little world building element. And it's a little thing, but your characters show up, they show up riding something, or they're in town and they see people show up riding things. It adds a level of fantasy to this that helps keep this a very immersive world. If you want other examples of this kind of stuff from other published adventures to kind of use as ways to sort of inspire you, Tomb of Annihilation, their description of Port Nyanzaru does a really good job, I think, of layering in some of these fantastic elements that make that place kind of unique. And so I wouldn't say, make your city a carbon copy of Port Nyanzaru. You certainly could, or make your settlement a carbon copy. But the sorts of things that get layered into that are the kinds of things that you might want to think about, the ways that people go about living their daily lives, accounting for the unique challenges and advantages of living in a particular location. So we have our stable master, who is who? I think it's Lucan Brightmoon. Am I correct in that? Perhaps. Yep. Lucan. Okay. Wears a big floppy hat, even indoors. Yeah, definitely does not like griffins. Got it. Okay, cool. So Sky Sun Gulch. Okay, stable. Lucan Bright Moon is the stable master here. He's did I? Sorry, I'm second guessing myself on something here. Oh yeah, that mysterious. Okay. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I'm second guessing myself on stuff here. Work we've already done, which is fine. Okay, so all right, so stable master here. He's a bit of a goof who wears a big floppy hat even indoors. But he has a way with animals that's second to none. Excellent. All right, so that gives us a little bit of a bit here about him. Let's see here. Metal weapons. Yeah, so let's see. Lucan boards. Conventional. Mounts and beasts of burden. Think horses and mules. For let's say 1 silver piece per day. Exotic mounts. Pegasi, wyverns, and the like. Cost 1 gold piece per day. No need to break the bank for storing your mounts, for boarding your mounts. All right. So let's see here. Then, we need an exotic feature as well. Let's say stables are a collection, are actually a small compound of buildings centered around a totem pole. Let's see, centered around a totem pole. The totem pole depicts, let's say the totem pole segments each depict the head of an iconic mount. And again, we'll say things like horses, dragon, horses, dragon, we'll just say etc. Giant raven, etc. Give ourselves some ideas there, so that when your players inevitably ask, we can answer that question. And so with this, one little structure here, we've got a whole atmosphere that grows up out of this. In some ways, I think a very kind of Legend of Zelda atmosphere, which I kind of like at the top of the plateau, right? Because we have a very westerny kind of town below, and we get this kind of, Hyrulean place up top. They marry well in my mind, and I think they make for a cool, cohesive world as you're playing. Cool. So with that, it needs a name. Let's call it Totem Lord Stables. I could, named after the totem pole. Why not? Why not? They don't all have to be, puzzles of names. In fact, sometimes it's better if they're not. Okay, so we have our general store, and we know that is Elria Shadowforge. And so let's refresh our memories on what she is about. Store, always smiling, even when angry, which is a secret. She doesn't want to know she's been dealing in illicit goods on the black market. So she definitely has a connection to our underworld hangout. Which actually I think I want to build first, now that it comes to it, because I do have kind of a clear mental image of what I want this to look like. We've got so many kind of very dry, elevated structures. Most of the town built up on levels that are well above the river's kind of flood point, right? And it's not that it's a torrential river, but it certainly would swell when the rains come through, things like that. So I can imagine there being a whole bunch of little kind of water carved caverns that kind of have wormed their way through the base of the plateau. All natural formed, and that these have been taken over by kind of this, maybe smugglers that come through here, maybe, any kind of criminal element. Um, and while I would think that most of them would be kind of uninhabited for the most part, I could absolutely see where sort of this underworld hangout, this meeting point of the dubious would be stationed down there in one of these very kind of wet caverns. Um, so, cool thing about underworld hangouts is you don't always have to give them names, but we probably should to make this one distinct from everything else. So, we'll come back to that though. So first, let's describe it. So, I'm envisioning. Um, let's give ourselves a little background first. So, seasonal swells in the river have eaten, I should say, have formed waterlogged caverns that worm their way through the base of both sides of the plateau. Many of these rooms, I should say, many of these caverns, are fully flooded during parts of the year, but a few become I'm imagining how to word this kind of pithily. But I should say, but in a few, the water forms kind of underground lake with the tide rising due to heavy rain or seasonal variations in flow. Let's see. A small community of clapboard shacks built on rickety wooden stilts has grown up in one such cavern. No one business or building dominates this space, but rather a collection of independent illicit operations that coexist rather a collection of independent illicit operations coexist here, making it I should say giving it an coexist here. Let's let's say like a flea market of crime. So yeah, I can see kind of again kind of a you know this sort of dark, dank underground cavern with the changes in water level, this pitch black um, water that rises up and down along the posts of this sort of stilt little market kind of thing where you got a lot of different stalls and little areas. I can see there being, you know, um, a bar down there, a place for criminals to, or the criminal community to kind of come together. There might be little stalls that service the various criminal needs. For example, if we had players that wanted to go find, poisons or other illegal, illicit things in town, they might end up getting directed down here. If we had anybody with the spy or criminal background who has that criminal contact feature, that might lead them down to this part here. Um, all kinds of reasons the characters might go looking for the unsavory element of a town, and giving ourselves that to work with is a little bit of fun color. But again, you gotta know your group, right? If you've got a group of paladins who are not going to go do this, well, let's not make sweeping declarations about paladins, but let's say you have a group of lawful good characters. They're not likely going to go looking for the criminal underworld to go hang out in. So you don't necessarily need to build this unless it comes up situationally. But again, um, it's it's a fun little colorful thing to add in there, and a cool thing for players to discover as they explore. So let's give ourselves some playable details here. So the this underworld meeting point. Well, let's just say this underworld market is not owned or dominated by any one entity, as no gangs yet exist in Sky Song Gulch. And I say yet exist because I can almost imagine a situation where the hags win, or the players are run, or the town doesn't rise with the players, and I could see how something, with the Blood Sisters in control, I could see, a criminal element, a stronger criminal element taking root here, and maybe coming up with some competing gangs as the various minions of the three sisters start waging kind of a secret war against one another as each of the Bloodgood sisters struggles for power. Again, that probably won't come to pass when we play this, when we play this adventures, but who knows? It's a cool little detail to keep in mind, so that if that kind of thing does happen, we have a consequence in the world. We have some way that the world is changed by the player's actions. And it gives us something that they can experience when they come back to Sky Song Gulch for whatever reason in the future, if they come back. Okay, so let's see here. What can be purchased down here? Illicit goods of all kinds can be purchased in this market. We're going to change this to Underworld Market to that mine. Specifically, poisons, and burglars. burglars. Yeah, putting an extra vowel in there, aren't I? Burglars tools. Burglars supply. Let's see here. Um, tools. These tools crowbars, etc., can be purchased down here. Um, I can, you can do things like make thieves' tools available at general stores and what have you. There's nothing wrong with that. Maybe smithies can make them, but if you have a place like this, it might be cool uh, to kind of dictate that this is where those things are found. That people in town aren't selling the equipment needed to go break into places as they might view it, but rather that kind of stuff is limited to the black market, to the illicit goods dealers. It's a personal choice. You can really go either way and be perfectly fine, but sometimes it's fun. Um, so let's see here, and then um, we'll say that the unique element is a an open-sided bar dominates one wall of the cavern. Let's see, an open-sided bar called what should we call it? What should we call it? Let's call it the pigeon stool. Let's see, the pigeon's stool dominates one wall in the cavern. It's operated by a say a milky. Let's see here. By a muttoned, chopped man. We'll just say by a man with shaggy mutton chops called Grimsby. Cool. Because again, we don't necessarily need a lot of detail. Let's give him an attitude. Let's say a dour man with shaggy mutton chops called Grimsby. Cool. So yeah, with that little detail in here, as you're kind of narrowing down the sort of the levels by which someone may come in contact with a particular NPC, we need less and less information for them, and we can build out those NPCs as we need to as we play. So in this case, they not only have to go to Skysung Gulch, they have to then also decide they're going to look for the underworld market, and then also decide they're going to kind of become a patron of the bar that's down there, and then also decide they're going to talk to the bartender. And so we have all these little layers of this, then this, then this, then this, which at any point the players might branch off of, keeping them from interacting with Grimsby. So we don't need as much for him as we would need for just about everybody else. So, cool. All right, well, we're nearing the end of our time here. So instead of getting partway into one of these buildings, I think we're going to go ahead and put a pin in it here. So thank you so much for watching. As always, I really enjoy this time with you all to just kind of go nuts and create and not really have to worry about an outline or a structure. that goes into making some of the more formal videos that I do. Um, if you enjoy these videos, if you enjoy my work, please like, subscribe, leave a comment, hit that bell icon so that you never miss a video. And if you want to come play D&D, please do join me on startplaying.games/GM/RJ Kerr. I've still got space, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, in some of my in one of my upcoming campaigns that we're going to be starting the first week of September using the new 2024 Player's Handbook. So excited to run that. Hope to see you there, and if not, I'll see you back here on Monday.